All right, today, lesson 19. I got two of my favorite characters of all time right here. Shrek is great. I love all the Shrek movies. Hope there's another one coming out eventually. Fantastic. Donkey might be one of the funniest characters of all time. Anyways, today we're going to talk about the C value. All right, so remember we've got y equals a sine bx plus c, or we could have a cosine bx plus c. We talked about the a value in our last lesson and how that stretches the graph. Now we're going to talk about the c value. This c value is going to be what's known as the midline of the graph. All right, it's where the graph is shifted to. All right, so the graph's going to get slid up or down. Now we've done shifts before with other graphs back when we were in school again. Like, for example, if I took x squared and put a plus 7 after it, that plus 7 would move the parabola up 7 units. It's the same concept for sine and cosine. So I'm going to show you two examples. One's pretty basic, and the other one's going to kind of combine what we did in the last lesson with today all in one. All right, so the first one we're going to do is y equals sine x with a plus 3 on the end. So the plus 3 is going to raise this graph up 3 units. Let's first, before we raise the graph though, let's graph sine x on its own first, just so we can remember what sine x itself looks like. So I've got my x and y axis set up like we always have been in radians. All right, sine's going to start here at 0. It goes up, comes down, goes back down, and goes back up again. And on this side, it does that. So that's just regular old sine x. It has an a value of 1, even though there's not 1 written there. That's why it was only stretched to 1 and down to -1. What does the plus 3 do? Well, it's going to move this graph's midline. All right, let me just talk about the midline real quick. The midline is the line that goes right down the middle of this graph. So I'm going to highlight it in orange right here. For this graph, it's the x-axis, is the midline. All right, so this is called the midline of the graph. Midline, there we go. We're going to move that midline up 3 units. So what's going to happen is the graph is now going to be sitting up here at 3, and its new midline will now be at 3. So basically you can think of it as the x-axis slid up 3 units, and now I'm going to graph sine off of that. All right, so what that is going to entail is taking every single point that's on the sine graph and sliding them all up 3 units. All right. For example, if I take this point right here, which is on 0, and I slide it up 3 units, it's now going to sit here. This point slid up 3 units will now be up here. This one will now be here. This one will now be here. This one will be here. This one will be here. That one there, and that one there. And when I reconnect all of my new points, there is my new sine graph. And it actually is now all the way up to 4 now for its maximum height there, because it was slid up 3 units. All right. So all I did is I took this black sine graph, slid everything up 3 units, and you can see my new midline is now the line y equals 3. All right. So that's what the 3 is going to do for us. It's going to shift the graph up 3 units, and it's going to make the midline change to that number. So let me do you another one that's going to combine what we did yesterday with today's stuff. All right, here's my second example, and it's the only other one I'm going to do because these get redundant after a while. But what we have here is a cosine graph this time. We have a shift down 2 units. We have a stretch or a dilation of 2. But we also have a negative in front of it, which we know from last lesson is going to reflect it over the x-axis. So we have 3 things we got to do to this cosine graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just graphing regular cosine. I'll put regular cosine up here. And if you're doing this with me, you're going to want to do it in pencil, because we're going to erase it here in a second after we move it. All right, so I'm going to just lightly dot in what regular cosine looks like before anything's been done to it. So regular cosine is going to look like this. Oops, this goes up and finishes up right there. And it comes down and goes back up. That is regular old just cosine of x. No stretch, no shift. But what we're going to do to this graph is we're going to shift it, we're going to stretch it, and we're going to reflect it. Now, what order do you do all that in? All right. I always just work left to right. Just always have. It just makes sense to me to do that. But it's really up to you what way you want to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and start with the negative, which is going to be a reflection. So I'm going to reflect this graph over the x-axis. So it's now going to look like this. Oh, got a little crazy there. Gotta go here. And then there. So I have taken the purple graph that was up here and reflected over the x-axis. So I'm going to get rid of that now. I don't need that anymore. That's what I mean when I said you probably should use some pencil, because we're going to erase stuff as we work along here. So I've done my reflection. Now I need to stretch the graph to 2. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to switch colors here. I'll go to black. Remember, a stretch of 2 means I'm going to pull this graph up to 2 and down to -2. All right, I'm not moving it up 2 units. I'm just stretching it to 2. So this point right here is now going to get stretched down to -2. These values, remember, these stay fixed on the x-axis. We don't change those. This will get stretched up to 2, this down to -2, this up to 2, and this down to -2. Excuse me. So, sketching in that graph now, again, sketching lightly because I'm going to erase this here in a little while. So there is the stretch applied. So now let me get rid of the orange and just quickly go over what we have so far now. So what we've done is we've flipped the graph over the x-axis, reflected it, we've stretched it to 2. Now the last thing we got to do is this shift of down 2. So I need to take every single point on this graph and slide them all down 2 units. All right, let me get one more color here. I'll go with red. All right, so if I take this point right here, it's already at -2, and I drop it down 2 units, it's actually going to go all the way down to -4 now. So I got to extend my y-axis a little bit here, down to -4. There we go. All right, so this point is going to drop down 2 units and now be right here. This point will drop down 2 units and now be at -2. This will drop down 2 units and be sitting on the x-axis now. This will drop down to -2. This will drop to -4. This will drop to -2. This will drop to 0. This will drop to -2. And this one will drop to -4. So I've taken all the important points on that graph and slid them all down. Now remember, this is also going to be our new midline. So just to give you a visual, our new midline is going to be right here at -2. So now if I just connect all these, remember, they're curves. I get this graph right here, which is now my final answer. All right. So it took us a while to get there. There were a lot of steps involved. Gonna get rid of the black graph because I don't need it anymore. Do the best I can there without ruining my other graph. And there is the graph of -2 cosine -2. One more time, just to emphasize what I did. I reflected it, flipped it over. I stretched it by 2, then I shifted the whole graph down 2 units to create this final result right here. For homework, I'm going to have you graph 3, sketch them like you did the last homework. I'll put the solutions up here momentarily, and then you can check them. Let me know if you have questions. In our next lesson, number 20, we are going to start looking at this b value right here, the number that's in front of the x. That complicates things a little bit.